10, 5 seconds.
I feel very called to become a member of the Catholic Church.
Love the Catholic Church. It's just the best place to be.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line. In North America, call toll-free 1-800-585-9396. That's 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
Welcome to another week of EWTN's Open Line. We're kicking off with Open Line Monday and our scriptural apologist extraordinaire, Mr. John Martignoni. If you've got a question for John, the number's 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. If you're outside the United States and Canada, we'd love to talk to you. Your number is 1-205-271-2985. That's 1-205-271-2985. Or you can send us an email, openline@ewtn.com. I'm Jack Williams. The lovely and talented Elena Rodriguez produces the program. And your call screener is Mr. Matt Gubensky. John Martignoni, I'm upset with Matt Gubensky.
Why is that?
He has a early 80s vintage Oldsmobile Cutlass that looks like it's about an early 40s vintage Oldsmobile Cutlass, affectionately named Carlita. And he has replaced Carlita. And he did it over the weekend without consulting me or anybody else.
Who might want to have purchased said Carlita?
No, Carlita is really kind of paired with Matt. You know, he really needs to be with Matt, but I just want the whole open line listening world to know that just when you thought you could count on somebody like Matt Gubensky, he disappoints.
What did he get to replace Carlita?
A Toyota Tundra. He's gone in a completely different direction.
Oh. Well, in his defense, when I was in my, late 20s, or I guess late 20s, I traded my 8-cylinder Corvette for a 3-cylinder Chevy Sprint.
Well, but that was for your own sanctification.
Well,
he's gone in the other direction.
Well, I guess, yeah, okay. So I guess we could say I'm holier than Matt, or
it looks like that.
Okay.
He'd have to make a case to suggest ototherwise. That's for sure.
I'm good with that.
I just hope he transfers his papist license plates, because those really made the vehicle. If you've got a question for John, the number's 1-800-585-9396. We've got an email from Anna right here in Hanceville, Alabama. She says, "Dear John, thanks for an awesome program and for your very clear and complete answers.
Smart girl.
This is in response to the man who just called saying that it wasn't very respectful to receive the Eucharist on the tongue because the tongue is quote-unquote dirty. My question is, where do the people who receive the Eucharist in the hand place it afterwards?" And that's Anna in Hanceville.
Well, Anna, we need to get you on here answering the questions.
Anna's gone and gotten logical on us, is what she's done.
She has, I tell you. And that's there's this ongoing thing about people. Some people say, "Oh, you should receive on the tongue. It's more respectful, more reverent." Other people say, "No, it's okay to receive in the hand. It's more respectful. It's more." What I say is my personal opinion is that it's more respectful to receive on the tongue, and so that's why I do it that way. That's my opinion. The church currently allows it either way, so no matter which camp you're in here, you have to realize that the other camp is doing what they want to do and that it's allowed by the church. So to receive in the hand.
And that's a key point that is often lost on those of us who tend to hang with folks in a more conservative camp.
That's correct.
That the church is a bigger place sometimes than we're willing to give it credit for.
That is correct. And the fact is you cannot, no one, whether they consider themselves on the right or the left, Orthodox, heterodox, whatever, you cannot sit there and try to be more strict than the church. If the church allows something, you can't say, "Oh, it's wrong for somebody to do that." No, it's not. It may be your opinion that it would be better to do it another way, but as long as the church allows it, you cannot declare definitively that's wrong to do. So folks who receive on the hand, you should be perfectly comfortable with people, and you receive standing up, you should be perfectly comfortable with people kneeling down, receiving on the tongue, or standing, receiving on the tongue. You who receive on the tongue, you have to be okay with those who receive in the hand. That's just the way it is, because the church allows either way at this moment in time.
Gene in Michigan, who listens via the internet, says, is it appropriate for Catholics to practice yoga as a form of exercise, or would that go against the commandment to worship no other gods before me, since yoga comes from the Hindu religion?
This is another one that you have camps, folks in opposing camps. There are those who would say, no, you cannot do yoga. It's bad. It's evil. You're opening up for evil spirits and such. Our own Johnette Bankovic would be in that camp. I think Dan Burke here at EWTN and with the National Catholic Register would be in that camp. And what I would recommend is, but then there's others who say, well, but if I'm just stretching, if I just use yoga to stretch, I know people who've used yoga to lose weight, to help heal from knee surgery or hip surgery and things like that, and they don't get into the spiritual aspects of it. Well, my opinion on this, I'm kind of more, if you're just doing it for exercise, I personally don't know what's wrong with it, and I don't know of anything that the church has definitively declared again that no, you cannot do this, or yes, this is allowed. But I think if you go to Dan Burke's website, if you do a internet search on Dan Burke yoga, he's got a very good 2 or 3 part series on the topic, and he's coming out that no, you shouldn't be doing this, and he gives all the reasons why. And I respect his logic and his thinking on this, but again, I don't know of anywhere that the church has definitively stated no, you cannot do this for exercise. I mean, obviously you can't do it on the spiritual aspects with getting into the mantras, the chanting, if any of that stuff that they might do, or any of the spiritual aspects, because that is Hindu spirituality. But what if you take something that's not Christian and you make it Christian? Is there anything wrong with that? Again, I can't say yay or nay definitively, but I would recommend getting Dan Burke's articles. What is his? Do you know what his website is?
It's the Avila Institute. If you Google the Avila Institute, and it's probably sitting right in front of me, spiritualdirection.com.
Spiritualdirection.com, and look up yoga. I think it was a 2 or 3 part series he did on yoga that was very good, very informative. So that would be my recommendation in that case.
Just getting started on an open line Monday. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. John Martignoni is in the house ready for your questions about scriptural apologetics. 1-800-585-9396.
From EWTN News Nightly in Washington, D.C., I'm Catherine Seltner with an EWTN Newslink. President Obama will send up to 250 troops to Syria to fight ISIS, in addition to the already 50 there. Obama says it's essential to keep momentum against ISIS. Pope Francis prays a merciful God will touch the hearts of those in Syria who've abducted Christians, including bishops and priests. During Sunday's Mass, he also asked for prayers for kidnapping victims worldwide. Ted Cruz and John Kasich team up against rival Donald Trump in hopes of denying him needed delegates to become the Republican presidential nominee. Kasich will give Cruz a clear path in Indiana, while Cruz will step aside in Oregon and New Mexico. And Pope Francis makes a surprise visit to an Earth Day celebration in Rome. He gave an address before listening to speeches from environmental activists and campaigners. I'm Catherine Seltner with your EWTN Newslink. Join us this evening for EWTN News Nightly.
Podcasts of Open Line are available within 24 hours of live broadcast. Go to EWTN.com and click on Multimedia.
This is Patrick Coffin. Join me for Catholic Answers Live. It's 2 hours dedicated to Catholic apologetics and evangelization. Designed for Catholics and non-Catholics alike, it's your opportunity to hear from and talk with some of the leading apologists and theologians in the church today. You've got questions? We've got Catholic Answers. Catholic Answers Live, weekdays 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Making a difference. EWTN Radio.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
EWTN Radio is heard coast to coast here in the United States on great stations like 88.7 FM in Syracuse, New York, 102.5 FM in Huntsville, Texas, and 1480 AM right here in Birmingham, Alabama. To the phones we go. Our leadoff hitter today is Catherine in Cincinnati, Ohio. She's listening to EWTN on Sacred Heart Radio. Catherine, you're on with John Martignoni.
Hi. Are you the one who has the devotion to St. Joan of Arc?
I am, yes.
Okay, I thought I remembered that from a previous show. I was calling concerning something related to her. The three voices who spoke to her were St. Michael the Archangel, St. Catherine of Alexandria, and St. Margaret of Antioch.
Right.
And I was wondering, St. Catherine of Alexandria was taken off the calendar and then put back on as an optional memorial, but St. Margaret of Antioch wasn't put back on at all. And also some other saints that I really like, St. Christopher, St. Barbara, were not put back on the calendar. When they were taken off, I believe it was 1969. And I didn't know if there was anything that Catholics can do to have saints put back on the calendar or to petition it, or if we can do anything about that.
Well, I would say pretty much the only thing you can, well, two things. Number one, obviously prayer. God, I like this saint, get them back on the calendar and pray for that particular saint's intercession as well. Secondly, write a letter, send an email, text, all of the above, to the congregation for the Divine Liturgy or Sacred Liturgy? I think Divine Liturgy. The congregation that overlooks the liturgy in Rome. I'm sure you can go to Vatican.va and get the appropriate information for that congregation and who's heading the congregation, and send a letter to the head of the congregation, maybe even to several of the other people in the congregation, saying, and if you know of others who you can convince to sign your letter or to send their own letters, do that as well. But excuse me, that would be the place to start. If you're talking about the liturgical calendar, well, the folks who look over the liturgy for the church are the ones who need to be petitioned in this regard. And petitioning the people at the head of the church is a time-honored tradition. So it's not something that's out of the norm. It's not something, you just don't do that. No, completely accepted and completely acceptable to do. But so that's how I would handle that. Okay?
Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Catherine. God bless you. Appreciate the phone call. That opens up a line for you at 1-800-585-9396. Next up is Alan calling from Canada. Alan, you're on with John Martignoni.
Hey, John.
Hey, Alan. How you doing today?
Good, guys. Good. I had a question for you. I'm kind of a little nervous to ask about this question because I don't know too much about it, but I was just wondering if a pope or a priest, I'm talking about years and years ago, were they ever married? I was told they were.
Yes. In regard to the Pope, we know for sure that the first Pope, Peter, was married because there's a mention in the Gospel about, Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law who was sick with fever. And after she was healed, she got up and started waiting on the people in the house. Apparently there was a crowd there at the time. So that's one. But as far as I know, he is the only pope that we know of that was married. because very early in the church, I mean, even with the apostles, it's believed by many that they had taken vows of celibacy. That's why at some point in the gospel, Peter says, we've given up everything to follow you. We've given up home, wife, etc., to follow you. Well, that doesn't mean they divorced their wives, because, and again, the only apostle I think we're sure was married was Peter. I don't know that any others have their wives mentioned in the scriptures, but it's likely that more than one of the apostles were married, because number one, people got married at earlier ages than we do today, back 2,000 years ago in Israel, and so it's very likely that these apostles were, except for John, were probably late 20s, 30s, maybe even into their 40s, and so obviously more than one of them probably was married. But again, why say, well, we gave up wives and houses, etc., to follow you? Well, there's a very good talk by Father Ray Ryland, God bless his soul. He did a talk, even though he was a married priest, he came over from the Anglican tradition. He did a talk on celibacy, and in his talk he points out how in the early church, it says in Matthew 19, Jesus says there are those who will make themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Well, essentially what he's talking about is those who give up their right to conjugal relations with their wife, or give up their right to have a wife in the first place, to be married in order to serve the church better. Paul being a perfect example of that. So Father Ryland argues in his talk that in the early church, celibacy, not just for the popes, but bishops and for the priest, was the standard, but that sometime in the early centuries, at some point, the Eastern churches kind of went to a married or allowed a married priesthood. The Eastern Orthodox churches now would be in that vein, where they have some priests that are not married and they have other priests that are married, but their bishops are not married at all. So the heads of the various churches, the various Orthodox churches, are not married. You cannot be named a bishop in the Orthodox churches if you're married. And I think the same is true in the Eastern Catholic churches as well, because there are married priests in the Eastern Catholic churches, the Maronite rite, Melkite rite, Byzantine rite, and so forth. They allowed for married priests. Then again, you have in the Latin rite, you have married priests. We have at least one married priest that I know of here in the Diocese of Birmingham. And why is that? Well, he's in the Anglican ordinariate. He's came over from the Anglican tradition. Other priests who were Anglican priests or Episcopal priests who converted to Catholicism, and then after their conversion, Pope John Paul II allowed for a special exemption, allowed them to be ordained if the local ordinary wishes it, and even though they're married and maybe married with children. So yes, priests originally were for the most part celibate, but then it changed in the East, and there is some allowance for it in the West as well now. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate
You're
the
very
phone
welcome,
call.
Alan. And what I would recommend, Alan, you might want to go to my website, BibleChristianSociety.com, and get that talk by Father Ray Ryland, Priestly Celibacy. It's free on CD or MP3 download, BibleChristianSociety.com.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate the phone call. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Next up is Father Frank in Omaha, Nebraska, listening to EWTN on Spirit Catholic Radio. Father Frank's got a little clarification on Catherine's question earlier. And Father Frank, we don't actually take people off the calendar, do we?
No, the situation is that with specifically with St. Christopher, he shares the feast day with St. James the Apostle.
So St. James outranks him, right?
They outranked him, that's right. And the reason I know that is because that happens to be my birthday as well. So I researched all the saints on that day, and I know Christopher and James share the same feast day.
Yeah, and Father, maybe you could speak a little to basically some saints, as Jack said, not removed from the calendar, but de-emphasized as their cults are not as, they're not as popular or not as widely known as perhaps they were at points in the past, right?
That's true, too, but you also have to remember we have more than 365 canonized saints.
That's correct.
And I was almost going to
be multiple people on different days.
I was almost going to suggest to you when Catherine said, "What can we do to get more?" And I was going to ask her if she could get more days put in the year. That'd be a good start.
There you go.
Yeah, that would work too, I suppose.
Father Frank, thanks so much for taking the time out to give us that clarification. We appreciate it. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. A couple of lines open for you right now at 1-800-585-9396 with your apologetics questions for John Martignoni. Next up is Jeremiah in Kerrville, Texas, listening to EWTN on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Jeremiah, you're on with John Martignoni.
Hi, how's it going?
All right, how are you doing, Jeremiah?
Good. I had a discussion the other day about baptism, and they mentioned that even if you weren't a priest or something and there was someone who needed to be baptized, that as long as you use the Trinitarian formula, you could baptize them. My question is, if you're just out in the woods on your own, get caught by a bear and you are not baptized, are you able to baptize yourself?
I don't believe so. If you have the desire for baptism at that point,
that's a different deal. Yeah,
that would be the baptism of desire would come into play. But I believe there has to be a minister of baptism or a person.
The person upon whom that sacrament is being conferred is not the minister of the sacrament, unlike the sacrament of matrimony, where the parties are the ministers of the sacrament.
But again, they're not conferring it on themselves. One's conferring on the other, and vice versa. So yeah, I don't believe that you are able to do so. You could call back on Friday if you want with Colin Donovan, and he could probably give you all the applicable canon law and liturgical norms and directives, etc. for that. But as far as I know, the answer is no. But you're not out of luck because of if you really, God, forgive me for my sins, I'm dying here, I really wanted to be baptized, then there is that possibility for the baptism of desire.
Is that helpful, Jeremiah?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate the phone call. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number with your questions for scriptural apologist John Martignoni. 1-800-585-9396. Cindy in Texas writes, John, she says, our church has started using the black cassocks with white surplices for the male altar servers only. The girls still wear the white albs. As a sacristan, I need the girls, but I try to compliment the males on how priestly they look.
Well, that's, and again, this is another one of those where you have different camps. The church currently allows the ordinary of the diocese, the bishop, to have female altar servers if he wishes to allow it. He does not have to allow it. There are bishops, I believe, who do not allow it here in the United States. And then there are bishops who tell the priest, you decide for your own parish what you would want. If you want the male altar servers only, fine. If you want to have female altar servers, fine. But there are a lot of people who say, no, it needs to only be boys up there on the altar serving. And I would tend to fall into that camp for a number of reasons, in that, where you see a lot of girl altar servers, you don't see boy altar servers. At the early ages, the boys are very awkward around the girls, and it can discourage them from serving on the altar, which, service on the altar is not a prerequisite, but it's something that helps build a desire or possibly instill a desire for the priesthood in these boys as they become young men and start thinking about, well, what should I do with my life? So different camps there, but again, the church allows it either way. But yes, when you've got that situation, girls and boys, if you can, really get the boys thinking about this is a pathway to the priesthood, or just thinking about, hey, could I be a priest? that's a good thing to do.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Open Line Monday with John Martignoni.
Toddlers are utterly free, maybe too free. In the quiet moments after communion the other day, my 3-year-old repeatedly shouted, "I tooted." They don't care what people think of them. They actually don't really worry about anything. Who's going to pay the bills? Where's my next meal going to come from? They get in their car seats without asking, where are we going? They fall asleep in those car seats and wake up somewhere else and never wonder, what happened last night? That's because they know they have a father and a mother who love them and look out for them. So they're free to enjoy the ride. As we get older, we have responsibilities and stresses that pile up on us. But it's important to remember that we still have a Heavenly Father who loves us. And no matter how crazy things get, He's looking out for us. And from the eternal perspective, everything's going to be fine. You know what that means? It means we can enjoy the ride. This is Chris Stefanik from RealLifeCatholic.com on EWTN Radio.
60 Seconds with Father Mitch Pacwa.
But so as to emphasize the gratuitous nature of salvation. In other words, what does it mean by it's gratuitous? You can't earn the grace of salvation. Nothing we do deserves salvation. I can't do enough good acts to save myself. That's heresy. The church declared that heresy in the time of Pelagius, back in the 4th century. And we don't believe it now. It is gratuitous because it's given by God's grace, freely, undeservedly. You don't deserve salvation. You don't deserve the forgiveness of sins. But you get it anyway. And this is a great, great gift for us. So we want to emphasize the gratuitous nature of salvation.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
Thank you for listening to EWTN Radio.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
It's Monday night. That means the journey home on EWTN television. Marcus Grodi welcomes Millie and Dale Lace, former Assemblies of God members, tonight. That's 8 Eastern on EWTN television. And tomorrow night on Mother Angelica Live Classics, Mother is going to talk about Abraham, the father of our faith. That's tomorrow at 8 Eastern on EWTN television. You know that the Lord asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac on the mountain when he was about roughly 12 years old. Do you know why that is?
Why?
Had he waited until he was a teenager, it wouldn't have been a sacrifice. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number.
As someone who has a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, I know exactly what you're talking about.
1-800-585-9396. Next stop for us is Kansas City, Missouri. Karen is listening on AM 1090. Karen, you're on with John Martignoni.
Yes, I'm calling from Kansas City. Thank you for taking my call. I'm asking about auras. I have a friend who has a friend, and I also know her, but I don't know her enough to confront her about anything. But she sees auras. And I told this friend of mine, no, I don't think that's right. I think it's occultic. But I don't really know how to confront about that, how to support that.
Well, auras, yeah. I have known people who said they saw auras as well, and I can't remember what they said about my aura. It was when I was out of the church.
Right.
And so...
Me too. I knew about it when I was out of the church.
It is generally associated with New Age or occultic practices. However, it could be that someone could literally be seeing these things, but not necessarily be delving into all of that, all of the other stuff. I imagine that might be rare for the two to be separated, but I suppose it is possible. And so what I would ask your friend who's better friends with this other person who sees the aura, say, what all is she into? I mean, does she do palm reading? Does she, anything like that? Any other kind of New Age practices? What is it, Reiki, I think the thing is, and that kind of thing, to see how deep, if this person is more deeply involved in occultic / New Age practices. Or is it just something, hey, I see these things, whether real or imagined, I see them, and I don't know why I see them, but I do, and that's just the way it is. Or has she actually researched into it and looked into it and is trying to hone this quote-unquote skill or what? So there's differences there in how I would approach. Number one, go online, because I haven't done a lot of research on auras. So I would go online, see if you can maybe go to Catholic.com, Catholic Answers website, type in auras, New Age practices, something along those lines. See if you can come up, excuse me, with something that connects the two, auras with the occult, black magic, etc., a little more directly. And if so, then, share that information with your friend who could hopefully share it with your mutual friend as well. But first thing to do is to do research and try to find some sort of Catholic website that speaks about auras. I tell you what, you might want to go to Jonette Benkovic's website as well. I think she does some stuff on New Age. Father Mitch Pacwa does stuff on New Age. He's got, what's his?
FatherMitch.com?
FatherMitch.com. Check out
FatherMitchPacwa.com. FatherMitchPacwa.com.
Father Mitch. Either way, you can do a search on it and it'll come up. But
Sue Brinkman would be a good person to Google.
That's who. Sue Brinkman. She's on Catholic Answers a lot. Do a search on her, and maybe if these websites allow you to send in questions, send in the questions. EWTN.com. Send in a question. They've got a place on their website where you can go and send in questions to have answered by folks. But generally, as I understand it, yes, it is associated with occultic practices, or at the very minimum, New Age practices, none of which are very good. But I suppose there could be the possibility where this is just kind of done innocently and someone doesn't really know what they're getting into. And so either way, though, just whatever information you get, share with your friend who can share with the other friend. Okay?
The saints do this? Do you know of any saints that has?
No, I've never heard.
I don't either.
No. So, like I said, as far as I know, it generally is associated with practices that you would not want to be associated with. Okay?
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for your program.
Very welcome.
You,
really learned a lot from your program.
Thank you so much. God bless you. We appreciate the kind words. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. I remember once my lovely wife was giving instruction to a subordinate at work, and the subordinate at work informed her that she was bending her aura.
That's, I've had, I can't remember somebody who was telling me that they'd see auras and they were looking at mine, and it was, I don't know if it was blue or what, or purple or whatever, and I was like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I don't think that sheen they were seeing was your aura.
And like I said, even when I was out of the church, I still thought, this is pretty strange.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Next up is Mike. He's driving through the great state of Nebraska, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Channel 130. Mike, thanks for holding. You're on with John Martignoni.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Question for you. As a Roman Catholic, if someone committed suicide, are they able to have Catholic rites at a funeral, as for doing that, or are they abolished from it? And do they just go to purgatory, or do they get to go into the heavenly kingdom?
Well, here's the deal. When someone commits suicide, it used to be that the church quite often would assume that this was a mortal sin because it appears that you're knowingly and willingly taking your own life, which is grave matter. So if something is grave matter and it's sinful grave matter, and it's engaged in with full consent of the will, full knowledge of the intellect, then it's mortal sin. However, in the latter part of the 20th century, with advances in scientific knowledge, medical knowledge about the brain and chemical imbalances and diseases of the brain and depression and so forth and so on, church came to realize that, well, there could be mitigating factors here. Someone may not be. Someone who has a mental illness, be it severe depression, be it some sort of chemical imbalance, they may not be in full control of their will. So it may be that it is not mortal sin in certain instances to commit suicide. If you're you're doing it because there's something, you're hearing voices and the voices are telling you kill yourself. Well, obviously there's something wrong there, and it's not necessarily the full knowledge of the intellect or full consent of the will, even though it is always and everywhere grave matter. So, yes, they can still be allowed to have a Catholic Mass because there are possibly extenuating circumstances in these situations. Will they go to purgatory? Well, the thing is, what you have to remember is when someone dies, even if the act of suicide because of extenuating circumstances is not a mortal sin, they still may have mortal sin for other reasons on their soul. Maybe they did something before their mental illness, if they do indeed have some sort of mental illness or mental imbalance. Maybe before that came into play, maybe they committed mortal sin that they never repented of. So they would indeed still go to hell because of that. If there's no other sin, let's say they've been to confession or because they've been mentally imbalanced or had a mental disease their entire adult life or since the age of reason, yes, it would still be a sinful act, but if it's not mortal sin, then yes, something probably where they would go to purgatory first before going to heaven. But again, we just don't know for sure. It would again depend how much does this person have control over their will, over their reason, etc., and what is in their heart, and only God would know that for sure. So, but purgatory would be a possibility, probably in many of those instances where it would not be a mortal sin because of extenuating circumstances. Does that answer what you were asking?
Yeah, I was just curious as a Roman Catholic how that, because I thought before Vatican II, it would be denied for the Mass for the Catholics.
More than likely, yes. But again, because of the advancements...
And really even for a period after Vatican II.
Yeah, because of the advancements in psychology, psychiatry, scientific knowledge of the brain, chemical imbalances, potential diseases of the brain, etc. So, it still could be denied. I mean, if I went down to my parish priest and said, Father, I'm in full control of my faculties, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I just don't want to live anymore, and to heck with the church and God and all that, and I shoot myself and die, well, then, I could very well be denied a Catholic Mass in that circumstance.
John Martignoni is in the house on this Open Line Monday, taking your questions about scriptural apologetics. The number's 1-800-585-9396, toll-free anywhere in North America, 1-800-585-9396.
and welcome to a special EWTN bookmark brief. I'm here with Dr. Monica Miller, talking to her about the authority of women in the Catholic Church, published by Emmaus Road. You can look for that interview in the future, but Doctor, give us a quick 1-minute brief on what your book's about.
Well, this book is, Doug, is an exploration, ultimately, really, of the covenant of redemption, as it is differentiated between the authority of men and the authority of women in the church. And since there's so much controversy about, well, what is the meaning? I mean, maybe we got the male thing settled, but what's the meaning of feminine authority in relationship to Christ, the Redeemer? And so I explore, in particular, for example, that the church is feminine. And does that mean then that we're talking about just a poeticism, just a symbolic way of talking, or is there something actually essential there, in which case women exemplify and express the true nature of the church in relationship to Christ, the bridegroom? So we want to explore those ideas and help women understand their role and their mission in the church in relationship to Christ.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. Look for the complete interview. This has been an EWTN bookmark brief.
Tomorrow on EWTN Radio, Open Line host Barbara McGuigan takes all your calls on pro-life issues, 3 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Hello, this is Bishop Ronald Gaynor of the Diocese of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
This is Michael Warsaw, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of EWTN.
This is Father Mitch Pacwa. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
Still time for your phone calls, 1-800-585-9396. Next up is Terry in Kalamazoo, Michigan, listening to EWTN on Holy Family Radio. Terry, you're on with John Martignoni.
Hello, thanks for taking my call. A question I have is, was the Eucharist celebrated any time between the resurrection of Jesus and the Ascension, or was it necessary for the Ascension to take place before the apostles could celebrate the Eucharist?
Well, I don't know that we could say
you can't remember
that. Well, yeah, I can't remember. It was so long ago. I would say no, it was not celebrated for the fact, but I don't know if the church makes a definitive pronouncement that it wasn't. And I know I don't think there's anything in Scripture about it, and I don't know of any early church fathers saying anything about it. So, but I would say that no, it probably was not, because the church celebrates its coming out party, debutante party, whatever, as Pentecost Sunday.
Did Jesus celebrate the Eucharist with the disciples on the road to Emmaus?
Well, and see, that's one thing where it was that the Eucharist. He
recognized
blessed
him
the
in the
bread,
breaking of the bread.
Broke the bread, yes. So there, but I think, didn't he say between something and something?
Between the crucifixion and the Ascension.
Yeah, okay. So other than that, I mean, that was possibly the Eucharist that he celebrated, but that was Jesus himself doing it. Did anyone else do it? Probably not, because again, before Pentecost, number one, you didn't have people being baptized into the church. And so, those baptisms were requisite for receiving the other sacraments. And furthermore, the apostles didn't really understand fully what all was going on, what they were supposed to be doing. It was the Holy Spirit coming at Pentecost that enlightened them to, okay, this is what Jesus' mission was. This is what he meant by that. This is what we're supposed to do. This is what we're supposed to take from what he said there. This is what we're getting from the Last Supper, so forth and so on. So it was after Pentecost that the church had its coming out party and started bringing people into the church, that we have the Eucharist being celebrated. before that, other than maybe another appearance somewhere by Jesus himself? Probably not. But again, I don't know that anyone can say with 100% certainty that no Eucharist was celebrated. But for the reasons I've just given, I would think that not until after Pentecost was the Eucharist celebrated as we have it today.
Are you just curious, Terry, or is there a specific thing you're wondering about?
Well, just curious, but I'm new to the church. I've only been part of the church for 2 years, and so I wondered if I missed something in formation. Holy Family Radio is giving me a lot of my formation, so thank you for being on here.
We appreciate your listening to us, Terry. Thanks so much. God bless you there in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We've still got time for your calls at 1-800-585-9396. Next up is Brian in Kansas City, Kansas, listening on KEXS. Brian, you're on with John Martignoni.
Hi, guys. I just had a question. I'm married, and I have 3 sisters, 2 of which are now engaged. Both of them, I assume, are going to be married Catholic, and both of them are currently living with their fiancés. I haven't had the conversation with my parents yet or anyone else about it. My wife's a theology teacher, and she has her say on it, but I wanted to get your guys' point of view on it. I'm going to be asked to stand in the wedding, and my wife is also, and I don't exactly feel comfortable with it, but before starting a fight within my family over it, I just wanted your opinion on whether or not I can stand in it and or should.
Okay. This is something that, number one, I would go first and foremost, assuming, like you said, they're being married Catholic, go to the pastor who they have officiating at their wedding and talk to him and say, these are my concerns. This is why I'm concerned, and let him, because hopefully he would have more information than you might have. But other than that, I believe that not knowing for sure what the situation is, and the fact that they are being married, again, from what you're saying, in a Catholic church, and that the pastor would probably have more information because, again, you can go and talk to him about certain things, but there may be certain things based on what he's heard in confession, etc., that he cannot discuss with you at all. But that the assumption would be that it would be okay for you to be in the wedding, because we're to assume the good unless we know for sure that there is something amiss here. That would prevent you from being able to say, hey, my presence here, I'm blessing this marriage, and I can't really do that in good conscience. So assume that there is nothing wrong unless you find out with 100% surety that it is otherwise. And if you do find out with 100% surety that it's otherwise, then I assume that the pastor would not allow a marriage with some impediments there to go forward in his parish. Does that make sense?
Cohabitation isn't enough?
No, actually it's not, because you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you're forced to make assumptions.
You're forced to make assumptions there. So assume that
they're living as brother and sister.
They're living as brother and sister, or even if they're not, assume that the pastor hopefully is aware of what's going on, and that things will be taken care of before the day of the wedding. Again, unless you know otherwise. And if you know otherwise, then the pastor should know otherwise, and there should be some discussion with the bride and the groom. Okay?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate the phone call. 1-800-585-9396. One line open for you. Mandy is in Nashville, Tennessee, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Channel 130. Mandy, you're on with John Martignoni.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I had a question about a pretty controversial topic among my Christian friends and just here in America in general, because it seems to be an American phenomenon. A lot of Christians and Catholics that I know circumcise their sons, and when I explain to them that it's not biblical according to the New Testament, it says in several places that, Christ will be of no advantage to you if you circumcise, and that if you circumcise, you must keep the whole law, the old laws. And I just wonder where's the clarification in there of Christians who circumcise their sons. They're basically circumcising them and claiming them as a Jew, and saying that, Jesus' blood sacrifice was not enough to atone for all our sins if they're still, circumcising by the old law. So I just want to get your thoughts on that, because it's something I struggle with.
Okay. What's going on there? When you read Galatians, where it says, if you're circumcised, then Christ is of no value to you. The whole context of the circumcision, no circumcision discussions, debate, etc. in the New Testament, and particularly there in Galatians, where you're quoting from, is the fact that there were this sect of Jewish Christians called the Judaizers. And what they were doing, they were going around to the Gentile converts and telling them that, hey, in order to be truly Christian, in order to follow God 100%, you have to not only do these things, baptism, etc., but you have to follow the Old Testament law as well. In other words, you have to be circumcised. You have to be kosher. You have to do this. You have to do that. At the Council of Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15, big debate was settled. No, we don't have to impose circumcision on the Gentile converts or any of these other Old Testament laws that were imposed on us. Now, circumcision now in the United States amongst Christians is not done to claim the children as Jews. It's done for various reasons. Some of them are health reasons. There's information out there. Some would say that it's healthier to be circumcised than not. Cuts down a possibility of certain diseases and such, and so on. So there's no purpose in being circumcised today in claiming as a Jew. Back then, the decision was, am I going to follow the old law or the new? And Paul was telling the Galatians, you don't have to follow the old law. These Judaizers, as he says earlier on, who has confounded you, you foolish Galatians? Who has bewitched you? Because they're being confused by these Judaizers. That's what's going on there. What's going on today has no relation to what was going on in the New Testament at that time.
Where can we find more of what you do?
BibleChristianSociety.com. BibleChristianSociety.com. Free CDs, MP3 downloads, free apologetics newsletters. It's all free.
Back at it tomorrow. Barbara McGuigan, our pro-life warrior, will be in the house with an edition of EWTN's Open Line Tuesday. On behalf of our host, John Martignoni, our producer, Elena Rodriguez, call screener, Matt Gabensky, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks for tuning in. Until we get together tomorrow, God bless.